Cape Coast Castle that is there on the edge of Ghana, right along the ocean. It is a place of historical significance because the British used it as a land post at the time when they sent the captured Africans to the United States in the slave trade. There's a lot of historical significance, much of it painful here. It is a place that President Obama and his wife Michelle and two daughters are visiting right now. A place of significance perhaps for Michelle Obama more than anyone else in our first family, as she is the great-granddaughter descendant of slaves here in the United States. But nonetheless, it promises to be a very historical visit by this president and something of an emotional one as well. Let's go right now to NBC's Mara Shavacampo, who is right there in the Ghana capital for us of Accra. Mara, give me some personal reflections, because you were there at this location. You did a piece for us and showed us a bit of the history and the actual location. Talk about what the place is like and the sentiment surrounding it.
Absolutely. I was there earlier in the week, and I actually had the same tour guide that the Obamas have now. So just to tell you a little bit about what that tour was like, as you mentioned, this was a trading post, and they traded a lot of things there: gold, tobacco, ivory, and tragically human beings as well in the as part of the transatlantic slave trade. Now, what they're going to be seeing here at this fortress is essentially their dungeons, and there's no other way to describe it. The male dungeon, which is really the most heart-wrenching, at least it was for me, is several feet underground, and it is completely dark. It is a dark, dank hole, and up to 1,000 men were placed there at a time. They stayed there for months at a time, sleeping there, eating there, using the restroom there. They were never let out. They were never bathed. They never got any exercise. Just a real tragic moment in history. They were kept there as it was kind of a warehouse, because that's where they were kept until the ships came in which case they could make the voyage to the Americas. Now, this castle, as well as all of them that are along the west coast of Africa, they all have what's known as the door of no return. This is the door through which these slaves passed through before they were loaded onto ships to the Americas, and they never saw their home or their families again. So it's really a very somber place. It makes history very real. It just puts it right there in front of you, and it does, in some cases, have extra significance for African Americans, because we know for certain that our ancestors came from one of these forts, if we know that we have a slave history, as Michelle Obama does. And so it carries a significance in that regard. It's also very significant for the world to see the first African-American president returning to a place of such tragedy in African-American history.
The point should be made that President Obama, best of our knowledge, he was not descendant at all from African slaves. His family hails from Kenya. So this is something that Michelle Obama, as I said earlier, may have particular, just something to be very poignant for her to be there at that location. Talk about how it plays into the community there and the culture. Is this a place that is reviled or revered? Is it respected? I mean, what is it? Or is it just a place of historical significance for those in Ghana?
You know, it's a place of history, and they're not ashamed of it. It's not a shameful part of history, but it is just a part of African history. And one point that you made, in that Obama is not the descendant of slaves, whereas Michelle Obama is. But something interesting that a gentleman said to me, who's an African, he's a Ghanaian, and I asked him a similar question. He said, yes, my direct ancestors may not have been taken, but it could have been an aunt, it could have been a cousin, it could have been an uncle. So they still do feel this connection, that it was their people that were taken from their homeland, and that is something that had a long-standing effect even after the slave trade was abolished, because they took the youngest, the strongest, the healthiest. So imagine a continent that has the youngest, the strongest, the healthiest taken away for hundreds of years. What does that mean for production, for jobs, for growth of those countries? It's a huge loss, and it's something that has real reverberations through time. So it's very significant for the Africans as well.
Yeah, and you know, as a mom, I'm looking at Sasha and Malia there touring with their parents, and what an education these girls are getting during the summer. I think it almost beats that which they get during the school year.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I was thinking about them when I was doing the tour, because for an adult, for someone who studied history, you know, it's very somber. And when I was there, I remember thinking to myself, this is going to give me nightmares. It's that powerful. And I remember thinking, is this appropriate for children? To be honest, I don't know if they'll fully grasp, because, you know, you go to a lot of places that are dark and dank. You know, some people's basements might have mildew in it or whatever, and they're not necessarily inherently scary places. What makes that place so horrifying is when you understand what happened there. So they may be too young to fully grasp the horror of hundreds of thousands of people being treated like animals for centuries. I don't know if they can really grasp that. And if they can't, I actually think that may be a benefit because they're very young, and that's a very, very scary concept to try to grasp.
I absolutely agree. I'm hopeful that they can't quite grasp the entire thing at this point. At what point does the president take off then and head back to the States?
He's going to head out later on this evening. It was a very short trip, about 21 hours, not even a full day. But, you know, the White House was committed to having him make a stop in sub-Saharan Africa. At this point, he's been to Europe several times, so it was about time for him to come here, and they chose Ghana, and the Ghanaians are very happy that he did. But he's heading out later today, and he's heading back to Washington.
Okay, well, we wish him safe travels, and you as well. NBC's Mara Shabacampo. Great perspective there from Ghana. Thanks so much for joining us.